next generation of warfare, psychological warfare. In modern conflict, the mind is a potent weapon. Discover General Michael T. Flynn's groundbreaking guide, The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Unlock tactics, strategies, and the mindset to navigate this cognitive battlefield that we all find ourselves in. Equip yourself against manipulation and emerge unscathed. Unleash your potential. Order now.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the AlphaWarrior Show. It is January 21st, 2026. It is Wednesday night, which means it is Operation Gladio night. We are going to be talking Operation 40. I peeked into it out of curiosity today when the colonel told me this was our subject matter, and I was like, this is going to be kind of interesting. With that, you guys do me a solid. The content is free, so smash the thumb, hit the heart, leave a comment. Let's get a big audience that's in here. And while you guys are doing that, I'm going to go to some amazing sponsors that keep this show free for you guys. So support the people that support this show, and we'll be back in just a moment.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our biggest 3-in-1 sale ever with a limited edition product, a back-in-stock special, and a closeout deal you won't find anywhere else. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get our MyPillow bed sheets, only $29.88. Any color, any style, any size, even kings. Regular $119.98, only $29.88. Once they're gone for good. How about our My Towels? They're finally back in stock, but not for long. Get a 6-piece My Towel set, regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And for the first time and the only time ever, get our limited edition premium My Pillows. They're made with Giza cotton and designer gusset. Queen $17.98, Kings only $19.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get the best offers ever. Quantities are extremely limited, so order now.
Science proves that a healthy immune system is the body's first defense against the smallest of ailments to the most catastrophic. Coriolus versicolor is the most sought-after, all-natural supplement for both humans and pets to help boost the immune system. There are over 400 studies worldwide on its effectiveness in humans, including Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and now from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. Together, we can help reverse this terrible tide now plaguing your loved ones and give them the immune-boosting supplements that they need.
And our last one before we get into the content, and this one comes directly for Rumble. So if you're not watching on Rumble, you're not going to see this awesome QR code that's going to populate on the screen. So make sure you head to Rumble so you can tap into this. And so they can freeze your accounts, shut off your cards, lock you out of your own money overnight. Banks don't protect you. You guys know my story from 2021. They control you. That's why real financial freedom starts with ownership. Introducing Rumble Wallet, a non-custodial wallet built for people who refuse to give up control. With Rumble Wallet, you don't just buy digital currency like Bitcoin and Tether. You can own Tether Gold, real gold, on the blockchain. Through Tether Gold, you get direct ownership of physical gold bars, each one fully allocated, verifiable by serial number, purity, and weight. This isn't paper gold. This isn't an IOU. This is real gold without bank vaults, storage fees, or gatekeepers. You can buy, sell, or move it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even with traditional gold markets are closed. And if you want, Tether Gold can be redeemed for physical gold. That's power. And when you support creators on Rumble, like this guy, you can tip them directly using the Rumble wallet right there. Peer-to-peer and outside the banking systems. No permissions, no middlemen, no cancel button. This wallet is yours forever. Folks, Rumble is taking care of us as creators, and you can help by going right into that little tip jar and dropping a little something, something. And when you click it, if you don't have a Rumble wallet already, it'll take you down the process to get that set up. So with that, it is Gladio time. Colonel, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
So Operation 40. I'm kind of curious. How did that land on your radar?
Well, it's in probably a quarter of the books that I've read. Um, it's it's kind of central to about a 15 or 20-year span of time of Operation Gladio that's unfolded not just in the United States, but in Operation Condor in Latin America. So it gets mentioned quite a bit. We hadn't talked about it specifically, so I've been kind of gathering bits and pieces from the different books and was going to write an article. And before I released it, I wanted to talk about it on here because it kind of circles a lot of what we covered over the last 2 weeks with the international syndicate and all of the resources that they've been after all of this time, as well as Operation Gladio operatives. And tonight we're going to focus on the US's, which I've labeled the Cuban exiles, that are, what makes up the preponderance of Operation 40. It was a code name of CIA operatives that had operated and carried out domestic terror events, not just in the United States, but in Cuba and in Latin America. So I've been reading about it for a long time. So this story starts on December 11th, 1959. There was, and again, it highlights the interaction between our military, which is the part that grieves me the most about walking down the Gladio road, of just how much of our military has been compromised by the CIA as well. So Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Caldwell King, he was chief of the CIA's Western Hemisphere Division. He had sent a confidential memorandum to Allen Dulles, the director of the CIA at the time. King was arguing that in Cuba, there existed a quote unquote far left dictatorship, which, if allowed to remain, will encourage similar actions against US holdings in Latin American countries. And what does he mean by that? Here's a military officer that is saying that if you allow Cuba to expropriate their own resources, their oil, their sugar cane plantations from American overlords, that could spread to the rest of Latin America. This is a military officer making this statement in writing to the CIA director, and that they should do everything they could to discourage that from happening. That is not the role of the US military. King, prior to being in this position, King had worked where? For Johnson & Johnson in South America. Before he joined the Office of Coordinator of Inter-American Affairs, he was stationed in Argentina between 1941 and 45, where he was engaged in feeding deceptive information to Japanese agents. For his service as a military attaché in Argentina, he was awarded the Legion of Merit. So what was going on in Argentina from 1943 to 1946? Operation Sunrise and Lyman Lemmesker and Allen Dulles's plan to ratline all of the Nazis out of Germany into Argentina. And who else was there? Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Caldwell King as a military attaché. So, yes, he was on the other end of Operation Sunrise in order to do the reception of forces of the Nazis being ratlined, thanks to Allen Dulles and Lyman Lemmesker, out of Europe. as a former Johnson & Johnson employee. As a result of the memo, Dulles established Operation 40 to make sure that did not happen. It obtained this name because there was originally 40 agents involved in the operation. It later expanded to approximately 70. The leader of the group in the White House was Vice President Richard Nixon. Tracy Barnes became the operating officer of what was also called the Cuban Task Force. The first meeting chaired by Barnes took place in his office on the 18th of January, 1960, and was attended by David Atlee Phillips, E. Howard Hunt, Jack Esterlin, and Frank Bender. Now, those are all names that are intimately involved in JM Wave, the CIA station in Miami, as well as Watergate and many other. A lot of those are tied to JFK's assassination too. So just keep that in mind because we're going to talk about it in a minute. Tracy Barnes, the guy that's basically running this Cuban task force called Operation 40, he worked as a lawyer with Frank Wisner at Carter Ledyard law firm in New York. He was a former OSS agent during the war. Barnes was sent to London, where he served under David Bruce, the head of the SOS operations in England. While in London, he spent time with Paul Nitz, who we could spend an entire day on that guy. And I want to go over a little bit about Tracy Barnes' boss, David Bruce, that he worked for in England during the war. In 1956, President Eisenhower appointed Bruce a member of the president's Board of Consultants of Foreign Intelligence Activities. Bruce moved to Washington, where he was associated with a group of journalists, politicians, government officials, and became known as the Georgetown Set. This group of people is basically Allen Dulles's domestic operatives. They included Frank Wisner, George Kennan, Dean Axon, Richard Bissell, Desmond Fitzgerald, Joseph Ossopp, and Stuart Ossopp, his brother. They were journalists. Tracy Barnes, Thomas Braden, Philip Graham of the Washington Post, Clark Clifford, who was intimately involved in BCCI, later the CIA fake bank, Walt Ristow, Eugene Ristow, Chip Bolin, Cord Meyer, CIA, James Angleton, CIA, William Averill Harriman of the Harriman Brown group, John McCloy, Felix Frankfurter, John Sherman Cooper, James Reston, Allen Dulles, and Paul Nitz. Nice little group of people. Those are basically operatives in the DC area. According to Fabian Escalante, a senior officer of the Cuban Department of State Security, which is their intelligence branch, in 1960, Richard Nixon recruited an important group of businessmen headed by none other than George H.W. Bush and Jack Creighton. You spell his name Crichton. Both of them were Texas oilmen, to gather the necessary funds for the operation. So they're soliciting private donations from businessmen who want to overthrow the Cuban government to fund their operation. This suggests that Operation 40 agents were involved in what some people would refer to as freelance work. We just call it the enterprise, which is the kind of covert part of the CIA that uses civilians. So you have the CIA, and then you have basically the shadow CIA that they operate off the books. That's what we're talking about. Jack Creighton himself was in the OSS along with Allen Dulles during World War II. His niche was to create front companies for the CIA. He started and ran an array of companies which tended to change names frequently. That's not him.
That's not, yeah, this is John.
You spell his name Crichton. They operated these companies below the radar and fronted for some of North Americans' biggest names, including the Brofmans of Seagram's, the DuPont's chemical empire, and the Kuhn-Loeb family of bankers. In 1952, Crichton joined a syndicate that included Everett Deloyer and Clint Murchison to use connections in the government of Spain's General Franco, which was a dictatorship, fascist, to acquire rare drilling rights in Spain. The operation was handled by Delta Drilling, which was owned by Joe Zeppa. In August of 1953, Crichton joined a company called the Empire Trust Company, which was basically a CIA front. He eventually became the vice president of the organization. And in a book called Our Crowd, The Great Jewish Families of New York, the company had a network of associates that amounted to something like a private CIA. The Empire Trust was also a major investor in defense contractor General Dynamics. He was an oil and natural gas industrialist from Dallas, Texas, who was among the first of his ranks to recognize the importance of petroleum reserves in the Middle East. Is that Spartan? Yeah, Spartacus. Yeah, I got some of the material from there. In 1951, he helped to establish San Juan Oil Company in Dallas, where he became the vice president. During the 1950s, he took a group of American businessmen to Yemen to search for oil. During his long career, he was the president of the Yemen Development Corporation, which tells you why we were in Yemen. He also worked at the Dorchester Gas Corporation. He was also involved in mining of copper, zinc, gold, silver, and nickel through a company called the Arabian Shield Development Company. In 1956, he became the commander of the 488th Military Intelligence Detachment. That was an intelligence reserve unit located in Texas, which was intimately involved in the JFK assassination.
Jesus.
According to Crichton, there were about 100 men in the unit, and nearly half of them came from the Dallas Police Department.
That's very interesting.
Isn't it? So what would it tell you if half of your police department was in a nefarious reserve intelligence detachment that was made up of a bunch of businessmen?
That this police department, well, one, I would assume that it's probably more than half. It's just half that we're probably aware of, and two, that police department is not being ran by who we think is running it, and they have access to all the databases that come with that police department,
which would make killing somebody in that city a whole lot easier, wouldn't it?
Well, you're handling the investigations, you're handling the APBs, like you're handling everything. You get to create the false leads. Like you literally are handling all four corners of that square.
Yeah. That's crazy, isn't it? Cretan was all, and this guy's CIA, okay? Let's just make that perfectly clear. A CIA guy is running an Army Reserve unit where half of the police department in Dallas is in his unit. So the CIA was running the Dallas Police Department. He was involved with several other oilmen in negotiating the drilling rights in Cuba under Batista, the guy the CIA controlled. Standard Oil of Indiana, which of course is a Rockefeller entity, signed an agreement with the Cuban Venezuelan Oil Voting Trust Company, a unit that was established by William F. Buckley Sr., also CIA, to access 15 million acres of possible oil fields. This organization, the Cuban Venezuelan Oil Voting Trust Company, was one of 4 or 5 most traded entities on the American Stock Exchange in the 1950s. Batista's successor, Fidel Castro, reduced the size of claims for oil exploration to a maximum of 20,000 acres and ended large-scale explorations by private companies. So you think they're going to be pissed off at Castro for doing that? Like they were pissed off at Chavez for doing it? The rise of Castro ruined the Cuban Castro Oil Company and its value, which had invested $30 million looking for oil in Cuba. In 1959, the two raised funds for the CIA's Operation 40, which organized the sabotage against Castro. So again, the CIA does not work for the American government. They are an agency for hire from the international syndicate. Cretan is important for many reasons. Among them, in November of 1963, he was involved in the arrangements of the fatal visit to Dallas of President Kennedy. Cretan's friend, Deputy Police Chief George Lumpkin, also a member of the 488th Military Intelligence Detachment, drove the pilot car of Kennedy's motorcade. The pilot car. Lieutenant Colonel George Whitmire.
And just to confirm, that's the car that he's actually in, not the one in front of him, right? Like that's the actual car carrying him?
No, I don't think so. I think it's the car that was in front of him.
Right in front of the point.
The one that slowed down so they could get the shot.
Man.
The pilot car stopped briefly in front of the school book depository, where Lumpkin spoke to a policeman controlling traffic at the corner of Houston and Elm. The Warren Commission report on the Kennedy assassination states that Cretan arranged for a member of the local Russian community to translate for the Russian-born Marina Oswald in the wake of the Kennedy assassination. His volunteer translated for Oswald during her initial questioning by the Dallas authorities in the hours immediately after her husband was arrested. So basically, we have no idea what she actually said because his guy not only is embedded in the police department, but is doing the translation for her. One last tidbit. In the 1950s, he became involved with several oilmen who began negotiating with Batista, as I mentioned before. One of the people that were involved in that negotiation with Cuba before Castro came to power, George de Morgenschild. George de Morgenschild is the house, the German White Russian, where Marie Oswald lived.
Oh, I remember you talking about this back when you were talking.
Yes. And George de Morgenschild was best friends with Allen Dulles because Allen Dulles met him in Baku, Azerbaijan, when he was 10 years old, buying an oil field for Standard Oil from George de Morgenschild's dad.
Have you searched out any of these terms in the JFK file release, Colonel?
I did a few months ago, but I haven't done a deep dive into it. I'm not of any of the new material. Okay.
I'm sure there's going to be some, because everybody's searching for all the popular names that people know about. But
Yeah.
some of these people you're talking about, I'm very curious if they'll populate inside the search in those files.
Yeah. It's a good idea. All right. Cretan would later remark, I like George. He's a nice guy. It is argued by Russ Baker in that Cretan's Empire Trust Company played a major role in financing the Cuban venture. On the 30th of November, 1956, there was a New York Times article written that said, quote, this Cuban Standalone Oil Company, which was an affiliate of Standard Oil Indiana, had signed an agreement with the Venezuelan Cuban Oil Voting Trust and the Trans-Cuba Oil Company for the development of a 3 million acre area in Cuba. This, of course, this is still under the Batista government. This is in addition to the original agreement covering 12 million acres. George de Morgenshield later told Alan E. Jenner of the Cuban Venezuelan oil venture that managed to obtain leases covering nearly half of Cuba in the 1950s. As Russ Baker pointed out in the Family of Secrets book, quote, though now almost completely forgotten, on many days in the 1950s, it was the most actively traded stock. That's how important that company was to investors in the United States, primarily in New York and Texas. And overnight, it was gone. Back to Operation 40. In 1990, Common Cause magazine argued that, quote, the CIA put millionaire Crichton and agent George Bush in charge of recruiting Cuban exiles for the CIA's invading army. Bush was working with the Texas oil magnate, Jack Cretan, who helped him in terms of the invasion, unquote. This story was linked to the release of a memorandum that, in context, addressed to FBI J. Edgar Hoover and signed November 1963, which read, Mr. George Bush of the CIA. The importance of that is that it is saying that George Bush was in the CIA in 1963. Because everybody touted George Bush when he was named the CIA director in the 70s, that he was one of the first to have never worked in the CIA.
But this is showing different.
Correct.
7 years difference.
Correct. He was in the CIA the entire time. Ronaldo Talidrid and Lorenzo Barredo claimed that in 1959, George Bush was asked to cooperate in funding the anti-Castro group that the CIA had created. The man assigned to him for their new mission was Felix Rodriguez. Do you remember Felix, the guy that Tucker interviewed from Brigade 25?
Oh, yes.
So he was Vice President George Bush's point man for Iran-Contra. Felix Rodriguez was. He also was the point man for this Operation 40 group. Felix Rodriguez.
Let me grab him.
Working for Vice President George Bush. So is it any wonder that Vice President George Bush in the 1980s hired him to run the Contra operation?
And that he was
No.
interviewed by Tucker Carlson,
And he was interviewed by Tucker Carlson.
whose father was in the CIA,
Yes.
but
Daniel,
not but not Tucker. Not Tucker. He wanted to, but he never made it happen.
we'll just
I'm
leave
glad you caught my sarcasm there.
we'll leave that right there. Daniel Hopsicker also takes the view that Operation 40 involved private funding. In the book Bury in the Boys, The CIA, the Mob, and America's Secret History, he claims that Richard Nixon had established Operation 40 as a result of pressure from American corporations, which had suffered at the hands of Castro. Webster, Griffin, Tarpley, and Anton Caton have argued that George Bush was very close to the members of Operation 40 as early as the 1960s. In September 1963, Bush launched his Senate campaign. At that time, Republicans were calling on JFK to take a more aggressive approach towards Castro. In one of Barry Goldwater's speech, he said, quote, "I advocate the recognition of the Cuban government in exile and would encourage this government in every way to reclaim its country. That this means financial and military, assistance." Bush took an
Real quick, Colonel, not to make you lose your thought, but did you know that he did a 60-minute story?
Yes, he's all over the news.
I'll have to go back and watch that one.
Yeah. And he spouts lies the entire time, just like he did when he was on Tucker Carlson's. That he was just in the room when Che Guevara was assassinated.
It's like, come on.
He just watched it. The guy that had hunted him for years just stood by and watched. Bush took a more extreme position than Goldwater and called for the new government in exile to invade Cuba. As the authors pointed out, beneficiaries of this policy would have been Theodore Shackley, who was by now the station chief in Miami, along with Felix Rodriguez, Chichi Quintero, and the rest of the boys of Operation 40, as well as the international syndicate member who had lost their investments in Cuba, to include the mafia. Paul Kangas is another investigator who has claimed that George Bush was involved with members of the Operation 40. Yeah, that's a picture of him. He was shot multiple times. They started on his legs and shot him all the way up his body to include his arms before they killed him.
They wanted to torture him.
Yes, and they did. In an article published in The Realist in 1990, Kangas claims, among other members of the CIA recruited by George H.W. Bush for the attacks on Cuba, were Frank Sturgis, Howard Hunt, Bernard Baker, and Rafael Quintero. In an article published in Granma in January of 2006, two journalists argued that another of Bush's recruit for the Bay of Pigs was Rafael Quintero, who was also part of this underworld organization and conspiracies against Cuba, stated, "If I was to tell what I know about Dallas and the Bay of Pigs, it would be the greatest scandal that ever rocked the nation." Fabian Escalante names William Pawley. You remember William Pawley?
I do.
Coney Island. Yeah, the guy that's like the Forrest Gump of Operation Gladio all over the place. William Pawley as being one of those that lobbied for the CIA to assassinate Fidel Castro. Escalante points out that Pawley had played a similar role in the CIA's overthrow of Arbenz in Guatemala. Increasingly, the CIA assembled virtually the same team used to overthrow the government of Arbenz. Tracy Barnes, Richard Bissell, David Morales, David Atlee Phillips, E. Howard Hunt, Rip Robertson, and Henry Hexer. Added to this list was several agents who had been involved in undercover operations in Germany, to include Ted Shackley, Tom Kleins, and William Harvey. According to Hopsicker, the following were also involved in Operation 40: Edwin Wilson, Barry Seals, William Seymour, Frank Sturgis, and Gary Hemming. It has also been pointed out that Operation 40 was not only involved in overthrowing Fidel Castro. Sturgis has claimed the assassination group would, upon orders, naturally assassinate any member of a military or political party of a foreign country that you're going to infiltrate, overthrow, and if necessary, some of your own members who were suspected as being foreign agents. In other words, they were free to kill anybody.
Any hint of paranoia, and that meant your life. You were going to be killed.
So pull up that picture.
The Frank Sturgis one?
No.
Or the assassination one?
Yeah. No, the picture I sent you.
Oh, that one. Gotcha. All right, that's over here.
All right. This picture says that the guy that's on the left, closest to the camera, the guy with his head down, that's Felix Rodriguez. Next to him, the guy with the glasses, that's Porter Goss. We'll get to Porter Goss in a minute. He eventually goes on to be the CIA director. And Barry Seal. He also says the guy there, the second one on the right, that's trying to hide his face, that's Frank Sturgis.
Oh, man.
This is a group of everybody in that picture is part of Operation 40. They're like mafia dons. Virtually every one of the field agents of Operation 40 were Cubans. And there's a whole list of their names, which I won't bore everybody with. CIA asset Don Boning, Bohning, who had a code name AM Carbon 3, wrote a book called Castro Obsession that was published in 2005. He said that Operation 40 was not actually established until March of 1961. He quotes one of his sources as saying that the group's initial objective was to take over the administration of towns and cities liberated by the invasion force that was going to be mounted, round up government officials and sympathizers, and secure the files of the government's intelligence agencies after the Bay of Pigs. Contrary to that, another author by the name of Larry Hancock, in a book called Someone Would Talk, written the following year, provides evidence that Operation 40 did not come to an end after the failed Bay of Pigs. Hancock says that a guy by the name of Jose Perdomo was closely involved with David Morales in 62 and 63. He points out that new documents provided by a researcher, Malcolm Blunt, confirms that Perdomo, the individual in charge of Operation 40, was actually the #1 exile in an organization that was trained and prepared by David Morales. One of these characters had been associated with Cuban politics. Rumors soon began circulating that it was not only Fidel Castro that was being targeted. On June 9th, 1961, author Schlesinger sent a memo to Richard Goodwin. Quote, Sam Halper, who has been the Times correspondent in Havana and more recently in Miami, came to see me last week. He has excellent contacts among the Cuban exiles. One of Maro's comments this morning reminded me that I had been meaning to pass on the following story as told to me by Halper. Halper says that CIA set up something called Operation 40 under the direction of a man named, as he recalled, Captain Louis Sangessis, who was also a chief of intelligence. Could be the same man.
How do you spell that last name, Colonel?
Which one?
Sangestis?
Sanjenis. Our author Schlesinger went on to say it was called Operation 40 because the original amount of 40 men were involved, but it was he later said it was enlarged to 70. The ostensible purpose of Operation 40 was to administer liberated territories in Cuba, but the CIA agent in charge, a man by the name of Felix, i.e. Felix Rodriguez, trained the members of the group in third-degree interrogation, torture, and general terrorism. The liberal Cuban exiles believed that the real purpose of Operation 40 was to, quote-unquote, kill communists, and after eliminating hardcore Fidelists, to go on to eliminate first the followers and then the followers of Verona, and finally to set up a dictatorship, presumably under our time, who is another dictator, unquote. In an interview, Escalante pointed out, quote, who in 1963 had the resources to assassinate Kennedy? Who had the means and who had the motives to kill the US president? CIA agents from Operation 40 who were rabidly anti-Kennedy. And among them was Orlando Bosch, who was responsible for blowing up an airplane, killing a whole bunch of people, Luis Posada Carreras, Antonio Vacarian, and Felix Rodriguez. This is not the first time that Escalante had pointed a finger at members of Operation 40. In December of 1995, the chief, Wayne Smith, of the Center for International Policy in Washington, D.C., had arranged a meeting on the assassination of JFK in the Bahamas. Others in attendance, and it lists a whole bunch of people's names. Most of them are notable authors like Peter Del Scott, Peter Kornblow, Mary and Ray LaFontaine, blah, blah, blah. During a session on the 7th of December, Escalante claimed that during captivity, Tony Cusita confessed that he had been involved in the assassination of Kennedy. He also named several other people as being involved in the operation, all of which were Operation 40. Not necessarily trigger pullers, but involved in the whole operation. It has been argued that people like Escalante said it is definitely true that much of this information was originally published in a periodical called Grandma, but there are other evidence to substantiate this theory. Shortly before his death in 1975, John Martino confessed to a Miami Newsday reporter, John Cummings, that he had been guilty of spreading false information implicating Lee Harvey Oswald in the assassination of JFK. Martino learned a great deal about electronics and became a specialist in gambling machines. This included developing devices that increased profits for casino owners. In 1956, Martino was invited by Alan Roth to do some work in Cuba. Roth was a manager of a casino in Havana owned by Traficani, the Florida mob boss. Over the next 3 years, Martino made a series of extended trips to Cuba, and a fellow worker at the casino said he was a very close friend of Jack Ruby's. In the summer of 1959, Martino was once again in Cuba. While at the casino, he had made a bad remark about Fidel Castro. He was overheard by a Castro supporter who reported him. And so in July of 1959, Martino was arrested and charged with trying to help people associated with Batista to escape from the island. Martino was held in prison for 3 years and not released until October 1962. Martino returned to the U.S., where he became involved in anti-Castro activities in Miami. Others involved with him included U.S. Ambassador William Pawley, Jerry Hemmings, Felipe Santiago, Frank Sturgis, and Eddie Bayo. Now, that group is the group that went on William Perry's yacht, or William Pawley's yacht, to Cuba to launch an invasion. That same group of people, supposedly just on their own. So millionaire William Pawley launches an invasion of Cuba off his yacht. Martino claimed that 2 of the gunmen were Cuban exiles at the assassination. It is believed that the 2 men were Hermino Diaz Garcia and Virgilio Gonzalez. He also added that he told me he'd been part of the assassination of Kennedy. He wasn't in Dallas pulling a trigger, but he was involved. He implied that his role was delivering money and facilitating things. He asked me not to write about it as long as he was alive. Fred Clausen also told the House Select Committee on Assassinations what he knew about his business partner's involvement in the case. He claimed John Martino told him, quote, the anti-Castro people put Oswald together. Oswald didn't know who he was working for or what he was doing. He was just ignorant of who was really pulling the things together. Oswald was to meet his contact at the Texas theater. They were to meet Oswald in the theater and get him out of the country. They eliminated him. Oswald made a mistake. There was no way we could get to him. That's why they had Ruby kill him. This is what this guy is saying. His wife, Florence Martino, at first refused to corroborate his story. However, in 1994, she told a reporter that her husband had said to her on the morning of the 22nd of November, 1963, Flo, they're going to kill Kennedy. They're going to kill him when he gets to Texas. And she later, she at first denied he said that, but later, several years later, she confirmed that he did tell her that morning. Hermino Diaz Garcia and Virgilio Gonzalez were both members of Operation 40. In addition, Rip Robertson, who according to Summers was a familiar face at John Martino's home, Summers also points out that Martino was very close to William Pawley and took part in the Bayo Pawley affair, which is what I was just talking about. This anti-Castro mission was known as Operation Tilt, and it also involved in a whole bunch of Operation 40 members. That's the one I was just talking about with William Pawley and his yacht. There's another key CIA figure in Operation 40 who has made a confession concerning the assassination of JFK. David Morales, who is the head of operations of JM Wave, the CIA station in Miami, at the time of the assassination. Gayton Fonzie carried out a full investigation of Morales while working on the House Select Committee on Assassinations. Unfortunately, Morales didn't testify because he died of a sudden heart attack.
Convenient.
Just before his testimony. And just a couple of years before that, the CIA had already admitted they had a heart attack gun. Did you want to say something?
I'm just, there's so many thoughts going through my mind. One, I'll bring this up so people can see it. Let me scroll to the top so people even know what I'm looking at. Different JFK things have been declassified over time. Obviously, the most massive one happening in this administration. This one says JFK assassination system identification form, and this populated on search result for Florence Martino. That's how I came across this one. But then I was reading this, and it was just blowing my mind that as you're saying a name, I'm seeing that name populate on this form, and sometimes that just shit just creeps me out sometimes. But right here with
Whoa, wait a minute. You see that John Birch Society? I
I do.
cannot tell you how many times that comes up in Operation Gladio.
Well, I'll read it real quick. Let me make it a little bit bigger so other people can see. Let me stretch this out. Here we go. John Birch Society. Looks like it says Prisbeck received the impression that the whales, Weyls, Wiles, have disassociated themselves from the Birchettes and have completely severed their relationships with the society and its purpose. They do not see unreadable Woollyman, a wealthy man who is the Birchetts' representative in Palm Beach. Woolman had entertained the Wills frequently when they first moved to Florida. During the entire length of Prisbeck's visit, and as far as she could judge, the Whales were completely isolated socially. They have been assimilated into a little town in which they live, and their only contact with the township is at the club which they frequent, but seldom, and then it's period. But the part that I was looking at here was because of the Martinos, and it just was kind of addressing who they are, the co-author of the book. And then there was this part here that I found a little interesting. It says Martino Nathaniel spoke of a trip that Martino had made to Cuba with an American newspaper woman of La Pin and 2 CIA agents. Nathaniel did not accompany them. It is Prisbeck's opinion that Nathaniel, who is a coward, just welched on the trip, but that he did finance it. The purpose of the trip was to contact a Cuban who was serving as a liaison for the 4 Russian generals in charge of training and organizing the Cuban military. The Cuban who met the group in the water at the edge of a beach in Cuba told them that the 4 generals wanted to escape and seek asylum in the United States. And then this is where I finish. Martino is going ahead with a follow-up whereby on a given signal, he and a group will sail to Cuba to pick up the generals. Nathaniel is going on a long lecture tour and will not be able to accompany the pickup team to Cuba. And then next one's obviously Lee Harvey Oswald.
So that pickup team was William Polly's yacht trip. That's what he was doing.
And so, and I'm just shooting from the cuff. I'm not making accusations or even allegations. I'm just shooting out thoughts, people, because I ain't trying to get sued for putting stuff out here. Because I don't know who's good or bad with some respect. But I find when you're sharing these stories and knowledge with this Colonel of not so distant stories of things that I'm just like, you wonder, and I'm thinking like Steve Bannon, Miles Gow, on yachts. And it's just like, were they the good guys? Were they the bad guys? You know, I've interviewed people from Miles Gow's, team. But then, they went to go, it was in New York. FBI goes to do a raid on on one of his condos up there, and the condo self-destructs. I mean, it just seems like, even though these are old stories from decades ago, it just seems
a very small playbook.
Yes. And it's just the same thing, meeting on boats. Back then it was journalists and newspapers. And folks, if you're not tracking where I'm getting at, they do these things now with podcasters and social media. Yes.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Bindergate,
Yeah, they do.
They bring in, this is my suspicion, they bring in journalists, podcasters, influencers that either have a, some type of relationship or security with them, or are they something different altogether? And that's kind of how my brain's just working as I'm listening to you. And it's just it's wild to me.
So I think that's the most beneficial part of our series is it shows you patterns in the past for you to apply today. And it literally changes the way you process everything.
You can't unsee it.
No, you can't ever. And that's why when they talk about these police departments, I mean, you look at Minneapolis right now, every one of those police officers in Minneapolis that is going along and has gone along with everything, they're corrupt. And there are so many Americans that have no idea how all of this happens. This is how it happens. They belong to like Masonic lodges. They belong to fraternity organizations that are infiltrated by the CIA or other nefarious actors. And they do their bidding because they pay them lots of money, and you don't get paid a lot of money as a cop.
One of the modern day people, in my opinion, being very careful here, that fits the mold of people you describe in here, Metropolitan or former Metropolitan Police Officer Michael Fanone.
Yes, 100%.
Completely checks the boxes to me on the stuff we study here.
And that other lady that went out to be the Berkeley chief of police.
Yes.
Lolanda or whatever her name was.
Yogananda Pittman.
Yes, yes. Perfect example. The Capitol Police was completely infiltrated. And it had to be in order to pull off January 6th.
Yep.
Yep. So it is possible, and this is how they do it. All right, back to our story. The reporter had tracked down Ruben Carbajal, a very close friend of Morales, and he saw Morales the night before he died. He also visited Morales in the hospital when he received news of the heart attack. Carbajal was convinced that Morales was killed by the CIA, like using a heart attack gun. Morales had told Carbajal that the agency would do that if he posed a threat to covert operations. Morales was a heavy drinker and had a reputation for being indiscreet when he drank. For August 1973, Morales allowed himself to be photographed for the Arizona Republic at a restaurant. When the photograph appeared in the newspaper the following day, it identified Morales as the Director of Operations, Counterinsurgency, and Special Activities in Washington, D.C., when he was supposed to be covert. Ruben Carbajal put the author in contact with Bob Walton, who was a business associate of David Morales. Walton confirmed Carbajal's account that Morales feared being killed by the CIA. On one occasion, he was told, "I know too much." Walton also told him about a conversation that he had with Morales about JFK in the spring of 1973. Walton had done some volunteer work for the Kennedy's senatorial campaign. When hearing the news, Morales launched an attack on Kennedy, describing him as a wimp who had betrayed the anti-Castro Cubans at the Bay of Pigs. He ended up by saying, "Well, we took care of that son of a bitch, didn't we?" Another important piece of evidence comes from Gene Wheaton. In 1995, Wheaton had approached the Assassination Records Review Board with information on the death of Kennedy. Ann Budemer, the chief investigator for the board, recorded that, quote, "Wheaton told me that from 1984 to 87, he spent a lot of time in the Washington, D.C. area, and that starting in 1985, he was recruited by the Ollie North network by the CIA officer he has information about."
Good old Ollie.
And of course, we know Felix Rodriguez shows up in that as well. He was running it. It was full of Cuban exiles. He got to know this man and woman, a super grade high-level CIA officer, and kept a bedroom in their Virginia home. His friend was a Marine Corps liaison in New Orleans and was the CIA's contact for Carlos Marcello, who is the mafia boss there. He had been responsible for running people into Cuba before the Bay of Pigs. His friend is now 68 years old, and over the course of a year or a year and a half, his friend had told him all about his activities training Cuban insurgency groups. Wheaton also got to know many of the Cubans who had been his friends and soldiers or operatives when the Cubans visited the Virginia home. His friend and the Cubans confirmed to Wheaton they assassinated JFK. Wheaton's friend said that he trained the Cubans who pulled the trigger. Wheaton said the street-level Cubans felt JFK was a traitor after the Bay of Pigs and wanted him killed. People above the Cubans wanted JF killed for other reasons. It was later revealed that Wheaton's friend was Carl E. Jenkins, a senior CIA officer. Jenkins had been appointed to the 1960 as the chief of base for the Cuban project. In 63, Jenkins provided paramilitary training to Manuel Artime and Chichi Quintero. Artime is the guy they wanted to install as the dictator after they got rid of Castro. And he had trained other members of the Movement for the Recovery of the Revolution, MRR. In an interview with William Law and Mark Sobel in the summer of 2005, Gene Wheaton claimed that Jenkins and Quintero were both involved in the assassination of Kennedy. It seems that the members of Operation 40, originally recruited to remove Fidel Castro, had been redirected to kill Kennedy, that someone had paid the team of assassins to kill the president. This is not as far-fetched an idea when you consider that in 1959, Richard Nixon was approaching oilmen like George H.W. Bush, Jack Creighton, to fund Operation 40. We also have the claim that Frank Sturgis, that this assassination group, Operation 40, would, upon orders, naturally assassinate either members of the military or political parties of a foreign country that they were going to infiltrate, and if necessary, their own members. To further support this theory, David Atlee Phillips died of cancer on 7 July 1988. He left behind an unpublished manuscript entitled Amlash Legacy. The leading characters is supposedly a fiction book, explicitly based on Phillips, Winston Scott, and James Angleton. The novel is about a CIA officer, Phillips, who lives in Mexico City. In the novel, the characters state, quote, "I was one of the officers who handled Lee Harvey Oswald. We gave him a mission of killing Fidel Castro in Cuba. I don't know why he killed Kennedy, but I do know he used precisely the exact same plan we devised against Castro. Thus, the CIA did not participate in the president's assassination, but it was responsible for it." Unquote. Don Boning, who we talked about before, who was AM Carbon 3, admits it is true, of course, that the CIA sanctioned plots to kill Fidel Castro and also initiated assassination plots. But did Operation 40 have anything to do with those efforts? In an attack on the author, it relies on information provided by CIA officials Rafael Quintero and Porter Goss to deny that Operation 40 was ever involved in carrying out assassinations. As a side note, Boning, the guy that supposedly was poo-pooing all of this, was a Miami Herald reporter and part of Operation Mockingbird. While working for the Miami Herald, he wrote extensively on the Bay of Pigs and the attempts to remove Fidel Castro from power. This had included carrying out interviews with CIA officers Jake Esterline and Jack Hawkins. He also reported on the overthrow of Salvador Allende, like he was getting information. That's the Chile overthrow. And he also was a key go-to on the Jonestown massacre in Guyana. He also was the CIA's go-to guy in Grenada. So they feed him stories to tell the CIA's version of events as a reporter.
You know who I think we're going to find is the modern day close to the head of the snake on the operational side of Operation Gladio?
Who?
John Brennan.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
I picture him facilitating these operations in modern time.
Yeah. I mean, He was behind a large chunk of the coup against President Trump. Repeatedly. Coups. Yes, absolutely. Modern day Gladio. Now, speaking of that, let's talk about Porter Goss. We've talked about him a couple of times. He was in the CIA as a CIA agent. And then supposedly he got really sick and he couldn't do that anymore. So he decided he's going to be a Florida politician and gets elected. Well, he actually got appointed and then elected to Congress. And he becomes, so happens because he's a CIA agent, the chairman of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence.
Come on.
In 1996. 1996. What happened right after 1996? Oh, he was the key sponsor of the Patriot Act in the House. After 9/11. Sitting on the Intelligence Committee as a CIA officer when the CIA was at least partly behind 9/11. They had their pinch hitter in Congress to usher in the Patriot Act.
We're talking about this guy right here, right?
Yes. And then guess what Bush rewarded him with after they got the Patriot Act? He gets to be the CIA director. Yeah. Yeah. Goss spoke Spanish, and this was very helpful for JM Wave Station running 2,200 Cuban agents. Vince Castostrero, a CIA agent at JM Wave, claimed that Goss was involved in paramilitary activities in training anti-Castro Cubans. Quote, I know he was involved in the Bay of Pigs operation. He worked out of Miami with Cuban exiles and took part in it, attempts to overthrow Castro. He was part of JM Wave, the CIA station chief in Miami, where he worked with the people like Ted Shackley, David Sanchez Morales, Edward Lansdale, William Harvey, and Tracy Barnes.
Before you go into that, and with this guy,
Goss.
So it says right here, Goss graduated from Yale University. Obviously, that shoots off major flags.
Yes.
In 1960 with a Bachelor of Arts in Ancient Greek. That's just interesting to me. But it says Goss also speaks Spanish and French. At Yale, he was in Timothy Dwight College, and he was a member of Book and Snake, a secret society. And when you highlight that one, it says Book and Snake, or the Society of Book and Snake, is a secret society for seniors at Yale University. It was established in 1863 and is the fourth oldest secret society at Yale. It is one of the ancient 8 societies at Yale. I'm very curious if we can find a member list or an alumni list of people in this specific society and how many ties they have to the CIA or CIA adjacent type of organizations.
Well, we've went on Warhamster and I's secret societies. We went through all of Skull and Bones and Scroll and Key, both of which are the top 2. We did not go through Book and Snake, although I know that exists there. Click on it.
Let's do. I hope. All right, here we go.
Go down to the bottom and see if they have an alumni. Some of them do.
Symbols, traditions, buildings, membership. Here's notable members.
There you go.
Les Aspin, Fernandad.
Oh gosh. You know who Les Aspin is, right? He was a SecDef.
Yeah, so it says former Secretary of Defense.
Yeah,
Fernandad,
he was Secretary of Defense when I was on active duty.
Fernandad Lamont Peter Bellin Jr., survivor of the Hindenburg, nephew of Miss Pierre S. DuPont. There's the DuPont family. Thomas G. Garrett, president of Winchester Repeating Arms Company. I don't already like the list as it starts. John Vernew Boisvert.
hold on. The Mrs. DuPont's nephew. The DuPont is the chemical family in Delaware.
And
then
weren't they one of the ones that have an operation coming out of Colombia?
they were the ones selling the chemicals to Colombia to make cocaine originally before it got outlawed. And DuPont was also the one of the DuPonts was involved in the savings and loan debacle with a big land. They own a big timber bunch of land in North Florida that was all involved in the mafia and CIA. That Bouvier guy, that's the father of Jackie Kennedy.
Yeah, that's what I saw. That it says father of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis.
Former Secretary of Treasury, law professor, founder of the Black Panthers.
Wow.
That's controlled ops.
100%. And so check this out. Not to get us on a tangent, and I really hope that you and Warhamster dive deep into this one. Founder of the Black Panthers. Now, the reason that's interesting is I brought up something. I was going to say it for the end of the show, but I'll just plug it in right now because you were talking about Dallas PD, and by no way am I insinuating anything. I'm just talking about coincidences here, folks. But one of the things that I remember, and this was during Obama's administration, was the 2016 shooting of the Dallas police officers.
Yeah.
And I feel like going back, looking at the officers that were murdered and the ones that were injured, just to see what their stories are. Maybe they're innocent victims that has nothing to do with this, or maybe there's a people given the history of Dallas PD where this was some type of hit job. And why do I say that? Because if you go to the suspect, which was this guy, Micaiah Johnson, he's a veteran. He was Reserve Army. Nothing too special about his training or anything like that. He was a 51 Bravo. He had honorable discharge. He was reserves or National Guard, whatever the Army's version of that is. But towards the end, he files complaints of racism. And so it gets investigated. Well, this is the guy that ends up shooting them. And then this is the one that dies in the standoff. So we never get his side of the story.
Right.
But it was, let me find it because it brought up the Black Panthers with him.
Well, he's a Black nationalist. It said up there, so that makes sense.
That's where I had. Yeah, let's see, Dallas PD. There's a Black
War veteran Black nationalist. Yeah.
But I remember reading something too about the Black Panthers in this one, or maybe it could have been during the shooting itself. Don't want to be all over the place about it, but let's see. Here's Obama motive. Oh, okay. Here we go. An investigation into his online activities uncovered his interest in the Black nationalist groups. The Southern Poverty Law Center, take it for what it is, and news outlets reported that Johnson liked the Facebook pages of Black nationalist organizations such as the New Black Panther Party, Nation of Islam, and the Black Riders Liberation Party. And so then we go to what we're looking at. Where is it? Did I lose ours? All kinds of things open here. Maybe it's the last. Oh, here we go. So then we get into here where was it? Kathleen Cleaver, law professor and founder of the Black Panther. It just,
yes.
How can this stuff it can't be coincidence, Colonel. No, it just can't be.
It's controlled opposition.
And so then it's like, is there something in one of these Dallas PD officers that was killed, or maybe one of the ones that was injured and not killed, that we need to look at and see where they went?
And that William Green down there, where it says Radio Free Europe, that's CIA. The Crusade for Freedom, CIA. And then it has Peter Goss there, which was CIA. You've got Mining Engineer, which would be part of the syndicate. Bill Nelson.
Henry Ford.
Henry Ford II. Yeah. Bob Woodward.
Oh, right there on the bottom.
Holy shit.
You and Warhamster got to do this one, Colonel.
Yeah.
You guys got to do this one.
That's crazy. All right. We're almost done. Larry Hancock wrote a book called Someone Would Have Talked in 2006, which I mentioned before, that evidence emerged that suggests the members of Operation 40 were involved in multiple assassinations. He even believes that the members of the organization were involved in JFK's assassination. The individuals knowingly involved in the actual conspiracy included both exiles and a small number of their most committed American supporters. It is likely that some of the participants were part of the Morales trained and organized intelligence service that was developed to support the 1962 action against Cuba, and which had a political assassination blacklist component, which means who they were all going to kill once they took over Cuba. Elements of this group were retained as Morales's intelligence and surveillance force in Miami after the failed Bay of Pigs. Some of them had been involved in agency-sanctioned projects to assassinate people around the world. This group was unofficially known as Operation 40. And I just want to note that the CIA routinely makes a blacklist for countries that they're going to overthrow. We found that recently. We're doing the Devil's Chessboard. They had a blacklist, and that's what they call it, for Guatemala when they overthrew Arbenz, of everybody they were going to go in and kill.
I wonder what kind of list we're on, because we're on a list.
I hope it's not the black one.
We're on some kind of list.
That's it. That's Operation 40 in a nutshell.
This is
just one operation of a plethora of operations.
And just because I don't want to lose the impact of what you were teaching us, I just want people because I'm looking at the different chats. Rory McGill 78 says, "Fucking Woodward," and I imagine that's how you said it too, Rory. And shout out to Golf Ladybug Live. Yes, we're live over there, you guys. On all the different channels. Operation Gladio is live. But I just want people to think about what you're seeing going on in Minneapolis and Minnesota. And like I said, I'm no way implicating any of the people wearing a badge. You guys know I love the badge. I will always love the badge. But we do kind of have to look at a side eye, because these guys may be doing their job, have no clue they're in the midst of an Operation Gladio operation. Completely clueless. They're expendable. Whether the border patrol officer dies or he doesn't die, as long as some type of reaction is forced that creates this, they get what they want. And it's, I think it was last week, maybe the week before, Secretary of War Hegseth said they're sending over 25 military judge advocate generals to assist with what's going on specifically in Minneapolis. That's a lot of military JAGs. And
so let me just say something about the cops. Obviously, I've never been one. I want to ask you a serious question. If you were a cop in Minneapolis right now, and your chief stood up there like that goon did, while the mayor is saying that they are going to fight the federal government, what would you do?
You can't say anything publicly as the rank and file guys, because you'll violate policy. And with
what would you do personally as a cop who was going to be told to stand down and not do your job?
Me personally, I would, assuming I'm not a part of the POA, because if I was part of the POA, I'd do something different. But just as an individual cop, I would file a grievance up the chain of command to put it on paper that I feel that they are passing unlawful orders, because that protects you in the realm of public opinion. But where I would try to weaponize my position against my police chief is say, and I believe you're creating an officer safety environment issue, because then I'm kind of protecting myself that anything I might say, I kind of have a fight when I go into the legal realm, because I'm already addressing the chain of command that you're creating something that's an imminent threat to our safety. And obviously you're going to include the community in that. So I would weaponize the policy against the policy internally. I'm telling you guys, this is kind of what pissed off the bad chief that came over to my agency.
That's where I'm going with this. And then
And
what eventually happens? They turn on you.
and eventually when this decision comes to do what they want, I would do what I've already shown that I would do. I wouldn't take the order.
Yeah.
And then ultimately it cost me my career.
Yeah.
But it's I'm okay with that.
And that's the problem that I have with when you say that cops in Minneapolis, they have the ability to take action internally, and when that doesn't work, you have to walk away. You cannot be party to insurrection in your own country.
Hindsight's 2020. I've learned so much more since 2019 when I lost my career. Things I would have done different is, aside from not following the order. Now, granted, he did it in a way that's a gray area, but hindsight, I wish I actually would have turned it into a big scandal rather than just take it as an individual matter. You're not going to make me do something you want. I wish I would have flipped that over and created a big old scandal out of it. I mean, ultimately, I probably would have came to the same end point, but it probably would have saved some other good guys
Yes.
that went down in the process. But again, at the time when all this was happening to me, I didn't know this world that I know now. I wasn't thinking that, Travis Walker, who was tied to the San Bernardino terrorist attack and did all these other things. It never dawned on me that there was probably some clandestine stuff this guy was a part of. And that's why he kept surviving and getting hired as a chief within California at different places where he kept doing corrupt stuff. I didn't know that stuff. Maybe I would have handled it different. I was just naive. I saw it in its simplest form. This was a guy that was power hungry, wanted to push power on a detective that he outranked, and it was a dick measuring contest. Like that's kind of where I saw it. And like I said, hindsight, it's just like, damn, no, this was far more of a bigger deal. This is the guy that pulled me off the MS-13 stuff as it came into Southern California. This is the guy that stopped me from doing these investigations. Now it's just like, well, shit, the writing's on the wall. Like,
Yeah.
But you don't know what you don't know. And that's why I do empathize with these cops that are out there, because a lot of them, I know they're smart guys. I know they're brave, but their knowledge of what's really going on is probably where I was. They don't see it that way.
Right. And so the only pushback that I would have is, now someone's dead. And the local police, had they stepped in to ensure that the people were not blocking roadways, I mean, just common everyday police work, they have obviously been directed not to be police. And at some point, you have to just say no. You are either going to let me be a policeman, and we are going to bring order to our streets, and these people can have permits to protest, which is your First Amendment right, but they do not have First Amendment rights to go through neighborhoods, go to hotels, beeping horns and playing all night. That's not in the First Amendment anywhere. And yet the cops and the police chief is facilitating all of that unrest. And to me, there has to be a mass walkout.
And that's why, and some of you people in the audience are just, your ability to start movements, legal ones, I might be very clear here, is you guys have the skill set, you have the networking. I'm telling you, if you and granted, I'm not trying to make excuses for cops, but I also live in the world of reality. Yeah. These cops, and I'm not talking about the young ones. The young ones, they're still wet behind the ears. They're just trying to learn how to be cops. I'm talking about the guys that have tenure. They're on task force. They're working with federal agencies. They're working with military agencies. They're working with DAs. They're working with, like the guys that are in the midst of this, that have the knowledge base. Most of these guys are on a less than 10-year countdown. Most of them probably less than a 5-year countdown.
I know.
And they're in this position where it's like, man, I have a 30-year career and a nice retirement that's coming for me, my kids, and my grandkids, do I want to rock the boat? And here's what makes that decision easy. And listen, I'm crazy. I did it knowing that it was going to be a headache. But most people are going to probably think about it more logically than maybe I approached it, and they're going to weigh that out. They're not going to strictly look at it as something moral, which is what we demand. Well, you should just do the right thing no matter what. And I get
And
that.
see, you're describing the military, you're describing the senior officers. When Biden came in and they started shoving all that transgender shit down, you're looking at your career of what you've worked through or worked for your entire career, and it is a moral dilemma. And you had one officer who put his rank on the table and walked away. One out of millions.
Are you talking about Scheller, Colonel Scheller?
Yeah.
Yeah, the level of respect I have for that man.
Yeah.
I can't
Not
even.
a general officer, not a colonel, him.
And because I brought him up last year, because you remember you had those uniformed personnel that went and they were protesting within like the courts, and I think one was an officer, one was like a enlisted, and they're like, oh, we're being persecuted. It's all one. Every single one of us knows the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and every single one of us knows exactly what's going to happen to us if we decide to take a political stance in uniform. We know that.
Yes, we do.
And Colonel Scheller stated that.
Yeah.
And people said, why did he plead guilty? Because he said, I violated the UCMJ when I took the position I did. But it was the cost that I was willing to pay because it had to be done. He didn't make excuses. He didn't say, have mercy on me or anything like that. He just said, as you hold me accountable, hold yourselves accountable. I mean, the dude is just a man's man. And
he's a rock star.
They brought him back into the administration.
I do.
Right? When I heard that news, I was like, talk about a dude with a bone to pick. Yes, yeah. But here's where I was going with why I brought that up. One of the things we can do as the civilian population is when an officer comes forward or a whistleblower comes forward, that is when society needs to publicly get behind them.
Yeah.
Give, send, go, whatever the case is. We need to show that we will back these people no matter what. They're not going to lose their house. They're not going to lose. They may lose their retirements and all that stuff, but they're going to still have the life that they committed to. Because what does that show? All the other guys see that and they're going to be like, you know what? Our community is going to take care of us when we lose everything. And that's teamwork. And I'm telling you, that's contagious. And it requires both doing it at the same time. You can't have the community say, well, you guys come out and do it, and then we'll do our part. You can't have the cops say, hey, community, you come out and promise to take care of us, and we'll do it. There just has to be both society and law enforcement are both going to step across the line at the same time and just trust that, hey, and I'm telling you, that's a deep state nightmare. That is a deep state nightmare because the leverage that administrations have in law enforcement and the military is they understand that we've worked our entire life for this skill set, for this retirement. We got nowhere to go if that's taken away, and they use that as leverage to silence people.
They do.
And in society, we can change that. I really believe we can change it. It was one of the reasons that I wanted to make sure my story was public, because I wanted people to see you can survive it. I'm not saying it ain't scary. There was not one day in 4 years where I wasn't scared of the outcome that laid in front of my family, and I struggled with, am I even going too far? Am I asking my family now to risk things and sacrifice things that maybe, am I going so far that now I'm being greedy with my moral stance? Like, it was very hard to navigate it. But in the end, people saw that some regular dude that, just one of us could stand up against the government and win. And that's why they offered the plea they did, because they understand the power and symbolism in that.
Yes, they do.
And if we can continue to do that, it's what Trump wants. If we can continue to do that, they can't stop us. There's no, and it requires zero illegal activity. Zero.
Correct.
They just got to see that you can't break up the public no more, that we're unified.
Yep, I agree.
And pay attention to Operation Gladio. Colonel, what do you have coming up? Where can people follow you? And we're taking off on YouTube.
That's cool.
I think in the last week we've gained like 1,000 followers on YouTube. So for all you guys that are watching on YouTube, you guys are kicking ass, spreading
I
the
see
word
a lot of them. Yeah.
over there. So thank you.
So I do my 4:00 show Monday through Friday on X, and it is also aired on YouTube at the Colonel's Corner. It's on Rumble at the Colonel's Corner. I have a Substack called the Colonel's Corner, and we go through books and learn all of this great information that I then aggregate and bring it to Alpha Warriors program. And we're doing the Devil's Chessboard right now, which is basically kind of a biological sketch of Alan Dulles. Very interesting. We've learned lots of things and just how evil a bastard that guy really is, down to the intimate details. And that there's very few people that are more evil than Alan Dulles was. And one of the things Trump has to do is rename Dulles Airport. He has to. It was technically named after his older brother, but he was just as evil. They were kind of a joint venture, if you will, but just total evil. But if you go to my Rumble page and hit the playlist, you'll get all of the book reviews that I've done. There's several. It's hundreds of hours of content. And then on Friday, Warhamster and I have moved our Secret Society podcast permanently from Thursday to Friday now. We do it at noon on Friday every week. So that's pretty much it.
And I hope you guys cover that Secret Society from AO now.
Back. I don't know why. I let him take the lead and I just kind of do the Gladio aspects of all of these people's careers. But I'm gonna have to go back and tell him we need to spend a day on that one.
I'd never heard of it. I'd never heard of
it. I just didn't realize that Peter Goss was part of it.
Well, Colonel, if you could do me a favor, I'm going to close this out real quick. I want to share something with you. Can't do it publicly, folks. Sorry, but I want to share something with you that over the last few days. But with that, you guys do us a solid, smash the thumb, hit the heart, leave a comment, put this show on the leaderboard, and the links down there. First one is the Operation Gladio store, and then lower down in the description, you'll find all the links to follow the Colonel. Please do us a solid and follow her. And with that, we'll catch you guys tomorrow. Badlands Daily in the morning, Sit Rep at night, and Just Alpha following Sit Rep. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Good night. God bless, and Semper Fi.